On October 21st, 1978, a 20-year-old pilot named Frederick Valentich took off from Melbourne, Australia, for what should have been a routine training flight. He was flying a small Cessna 182L, alone, heading across the Bass Strait toward King Island. It was supposed to be simple, straightforward, uneventful. Instead, it became one of aviation's strangest unsolved mysteries, because during that flight, Valentich radioed air traffic control and reported something deeply unsettling. He said there was another aircraft near him. At first, that might not sound unusual. Planes cross paths all the time. But then his descriptions became stranger and stranger. He said the object was moving fast, that it had bright lights, that it was circling above him. And then, in one of the most chilling final radio exchanges in aviation history, he said something that has been repeated for decades. "It's not an aircraft." Moments later, the transmission ended. Frederick Valentich was never seen again. No confirmed wreckage, no body, no final explanation, just silence. And that silence has left behind a mystery that still sparks debate nearly half a century later. Who was Frederick Valentich? What did he actually see that night? Was this a tragic accident, a deliberate disappearance, or one of the most famous alleged UFO encounters ever recorded? This is the mystery of the pilot who vanished into the night. Frederick Valentich was young, ambitious, and fascinated by aviation. He came from a family in Australia and had wanted to be a pilot for years. By 1978, he had a private pilot license and had logged around 150 hours of flying time, which meant he was experienced enough to be in the air, but still far from a veteran pilot. That detail matters, because when people look back on this case, one of the biggest questions is whether Valentich was reliable enough to correctly interpret what he saw. Some believed he was a serious young pilot who encountered something inexplicable. Others argued he was too inexperienced, too eager, and perhaps too vulnerable to misjudging what was happening around him. There were also concerns about his training record. Reports later suggested that he had failed some examinations and had a history of making mistakes while flying. That does not mean he was reckless, but it does open the door to another possibility: that whatever happened that night may have been the result of confusion rather than something supernatural. Still, confusion alone does not explain why this case became legendary. To understand that, you have to look at the flight itself. On the evening of October 21st, Valentich departed Moorabbin Airport near Melbourne in his Cessna. He told people he was heading to King Island, which lies in the Bass Strait between mainland Australia and Tasmania. He reportedly said he planned to pick up passengers, although that part of the story has always raised questions, because there appears to have been no clear confirmation that such passengers were actually waiting for him. The weather was considered acceptable for visual flight. It was evening, and while the conditions were not perfect, they were not considered extreme. Valentich set off over the water, and for a while, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then, at around 7:06 p.m., he contacted Melbourne Air Traffic Control and asked whether there were any known aircraft flying below 5,000 feet in his area. The answer came back: no. That should have settled it. But Valentich then said he could see a large aircraft flying above him. Air Traffic Control checked again. There were no known aircraft in the area. Valentich continued describing what he was seeing. He said it appeared to have 4 bright lights. He said it was about 1,000 feet above him. He said it was moving at a high speed. At one point, he seemed uncertain whether the object was approaching him or simply passing by. Then his descriptions became even stranger. He said the object was orbiting above him. He described it as long, metallic, and shiny, with a green light. He said it seemed to vanish and then reappear. He sounded unsettled, but not hysterical. His voice, in the surviving transcript, comes across as alert, focused, and increasingly uneasy. Air Traffic Control continued asking for clarification, but Valentich struggled to describe exactly what he was dealing with. And then came the line that made the case famous: "It's not an aircraft." That sentence has carried this case for decades. Because if it was not an aircraft, then what was it? After that, there was a strange metallic scraping sound transmitted over the radio. The noise lasted for several seconds, Then the line went dead. No distress call followed, no crash signal, no further contact, just silence over the Bass Strait. As soon as communication was lost, a search operation began. Given the seriousness of the final transmission, authorities had every reason to believe a crash was possible. Search teams looked over the sea and surrounding areas, hoping to find wreckage, oil slicks, a life vest, anything. Nothing conclusive was found. No confirmed trace of Frederick Valentich or his aircraft was recovered in the immediate aftermath. That absence is one of the biggest reasons this mystery still survives. In many aviation disappearances, even when the cause is unknown at first, wreckage eventually tells the story. Metal sinks, debris floats, currents carry evidence somewhere. But in this case, there was almost nothing. That vacuum allowed theories to grow, and they grew fast. The most famous theory, of course, is the UFO explanation. Supporters of that idea point to the radio transcript. Valentich clearly believed he was being followed or observed by something unusual. He repeatedly described bright lights, rapid motion, and behavior that did not match a conventional aircraft. His final statement suggests that even as a pilot, he no longer believed he was looking at a normal plane. Some witnesses on the ground reportedly claimed to have seen strange lights in the sky around that time. Over the years, the case became one of Australia's most well-known UFO incidents, often cited alongside other famous unexplained encounters. In this version of events, Frederick Valentich did not simply crash. He encountered something unknown, possibly otherworldly, and vanished as a result. It is a dramatic theory. It is also the one that made the story famous far beyond Australia, but it is far from the only explanation. A more skeptical theory is that Valentich became disoriented while flying at night over water, and that what he saw was not a mysterious object, but an illusion caused by the environment. Night flying over dark ocean can be deceptive, especially for a relatively inexperienced pilot. Without a clear horizon, spatial disorientation becomes a real danger. A pilot can lose all sense of what is up, down, level, or turning. In some cases, they may believe another object is moving around them when they are actually the one moving. Some investigators have suggested that Valentich may have been flying upside down or in a descending spiral without realizing it. The lights he reported could have been stars, planets, or even his own aircraft lights reflected in the windscreen. Venus in particular has often been mentioned in later discussions, since it was bright enough that evening to catch attention. If that sounds too simple, remember that aviation accidents caused by disorientation are not rare. Pilots have crashed while convinced their instruments were wrong, or while misreading visual cues in darkness. This theory would also help explain the metallic sound at the end. If the aircraft was losing control, the noise could have come from a microphone shifting, engine strain, or some part of the cockpit rattling violently in the final moments. In that scenario, the mystery is tragic, but not supernatural. A young pilot becomes confused, misidentifies what he is seeing, and crashes into the sea. There is another theory that some people find even more intriguing: the possibility that Frederick Valentich staged his own disappearance. This idea comes from several odd details. The reported purpose of the flight has always seemed questionable. The supposed passengers on King Island were never clearly established. Valentich was known to be interested in UFOs and strange phenomena. Some wondered whether he might have deliberately invented the encounter as part of a plan to disappear and start a new life. It sounds far-fetched, but when investigators cannot find a body or wreckage, staged disappearance theories almost always appear. Still, there are major problems with this explanation. For one thing, disappearing successfully from a small aircraft over open water would be extremely difficult. It would require planning, coordination, and a landing location or pickup point that has never been convincingly identified. There is also no clear evidence that Valentich had the resources or motive to pull off such a disappearance. It remains possible in the abstract, but there is little solid proof. And then there is the emotional weight of the final transmission. Listening to the account, many people do not hear a man acting. They hear someone genuinely confused and alarmed. Years later, the mystery took another turn. In 1983, an engine cowl flap was discovered on Flinders Island, which is located in the Bass Strait region. Investigators examined it, and found that it could have come from the type of aircraft Valentich was flying. While it was never enough to close the case with certainty, it gave some support to the crash theory. If part of his plane really had washed ashore, that would suggest the Cessna likely went down in the water. But even that did not fully settle the matter. A single aircraft part is not a complete answer. It does not explain why Valentich said what he said, what he believed he saw, or why the event unfolded the way it did. It only narrows the possibilities slightly. And that is why the case still holds attention, because it sits in a frustrating middle ground. There is enough evidence to suggest a real accident, but there is also enough strangeness to keep the mystery alive. The transcript is not a campfire story passed down decades later. It is a real communication between a pilot and air traffic control. That gives the case a chilling sense of immediacy. You are not hearing a legend. You are hearing a moment unfold in real time, with a man trying to describe something he does not understand. That is what makes this case so effective as a mystery. It does not rely on one impossible claim. Instead, it gives you just enough uncertainty to pull you in. If Valentich was mistaken, what exactly caused the mistake? Why did he sound so convinced that another object was there? Why describe movement above him, circling him, shining bright lights down at him? Why say so clearly that it was not an aircraft? And if he was right, then the question becomes even more unsettling. What was with him in the sky that night? The Bass Strait itself adds to the atmosphere of the case. It has a reputation for rough conditions, isolation, and danger. Over the years, it has seen shipwrecks, disappearances, and difficult flying conditions. It is exactly the kind of place where rational explanations and eerie storytelling blur together. A crash there is believable. So is mystery. That is why people still return to this story. It contains that perfect mix of realism and impossibility. A real pilot, a real flight, a real transcript, a real disappearance. But no ending, no final answer. Just a young man alone in the cockpit of a small plane, flying over dark water at night, trying to explain something that should not have been there. Then silence. Almost every unsolved mystery reaches a point where people divide into camps. Some say the answer is obvious. Others say the obvious answer leaves too much unexplained. The Frederick Valentich case is exactly that kind of mystery. The skeptical side says this was a textbook example of pilot disorientation. A young flyer, limited experience, darkness, ocean below, stars above, and a tragic loss of control. It is clean, plausible, and supported by the fact that small aircraft accidents can leave very little behind. The believers say that explanation feels incomplete. They point to the object's reported behavior, the final statement, the witnesses who claim to see strange lights, and the overall oddness of the encounter. To them, this is one of the strongest cases that something truly unexplained happened in the sky. And then there are those who sit somewhere in the middle. Maybe Valentich did crash. Maybe he also saw something unusual first. Those two possibilities are not mutually exclusive. A strange light, a mistaken interpretation, rising panic, loss of orientation, and then disaster. In that version, the mystery is not necessarily extraterrestrial, but it is still unsettling. A brief encounter with something ambiguous may have triggered the chain of events that killed him. That possibility may be the most haunting of all, because it means he may have died terrified, convinced that something unknown was hunting him in the dark. Frederick Valentich was only 20 years old when he vanished. He left behind a mystery that has outlived him by decades. No matter which theory you believe, the basic facts remain deeply eerie. He took off alone. He reported a strange object. He said it was not an aircraft. Then the radio filled with metallic noise, and he disappeared. That is the whole case in its simplest form, and maybe that is why it still works. Because the best mysteries are often the ones with the fewest moving parts. A sky, a voice, a final message, and a disappearance with no ending. Was Frederick Valentich the victim of a tragic aviation accident? Did he become disoriented and unknowingly spiral into the sea? Did he stage his own disappearance in one of the boldest vanishing acts imaginable? Or did he encounter something in the sky that has never been properly explained? We still do not know. And until we do, the flight of Frederick Valentich remains one of the most chilling, unsolved mysteries in aviation history. If you enjoy strange, unsolved mysteries, check out the next video on your screen.